Mr Speaker, the committee has considered the Injury Prevention, Rehabilitation and Compensation Amendment Bill and reports it with amendment. Mr Speaker, I move the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. This bill is set down for third reading forthwith.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Accident Compensation Amendment Bill now be read a third time. Mr Speaker, this bill comes down to something very simple. What scale of increases in levies can New Zealanders afford? Because this bill halves the scale of the increases in ACC that would be required of motorists, that would be required of workers and required of businesses. Mr Speaker, the most extraordinary part of the committee stage debate on this bill was this. There was over 100 contributions from members of the opposition, but not once did they mention the issue of levies for ordinary New Zealanders and for motorists and for businesses. And I ask this question very simply, Mr Chairman. Can New Zealanders afford an extra $74 per car for their car registration? Because if you do not support this bill, that is the scale of increase that is required under the existing Act for the motor vehicle account. I ask the question, can New Zealanders right now afford an additional $300 a year in terms of the earner's levy for a person on the average wage? Members on this side of the House say no, they can't. Members on that side of the House want to impose that additional cost onto the normal house owner. And the third point I make, because I hear so many speeches about jobs today, can the businesses of New Zealand afford a 25% increase in their ACC levies on the 1st of April? Members on this side of the House says no, they can't. Members on that side of the House seem ignorant of the sorts of pressure that businesses are under and the sort of cost that would be imposed on them if we did not proceed with this amendment bill. You see, Mr Speaker, members opposite are in a state of denial. It is a statement of fact that Mary Ann Street, the former Minister for ACC, signed off on a $2.4 billion loss in ACC in June 2008. But it's worse than that. It's worse than that. After declaring a $2.4 billion loss in a cynical political exercise, members opposite then extended the ACC scheme in additional a dozen areas without provide any funding. That's what members opposite did, and despite repeated challenges from this side of the House to provide some explanation for that reckless and irresponsible act, we have not heard a single member respond to that challenge. The reality is this, and no member opposite has denied these facts. The costs of ACC claims over the last 4 years has increased by $1.3 billion or 57% in just 4 years. 57% increase in claims costs in the last 4 years. And the cynical part of the opposition is this. They get on the steps of Parliament and they protest increases in ACC levies. They also participate in protests against reductions in entitlement. Well, the twain don't meet. You can't have it both ways unless members are financially illiterate. Now, the Green Party members have promoted a view that the ACC scheme should change to a pay-as-you-go basis. And that would be fair. And that argument is a credible argument, and I'll be happy to have the debate about that. But where Labour members are all over the paddock is in the one breath they use figures on a pay-as-you-go basis, but in the next breath they say that they want to have a fully funded scheme, and despite repeated challenges, is it Labour policy for a full funded scheme or pay-as-you-go? They will not answer, they do not know. Frankly, they are unfit not just to be the government, but to be the opposition when they cannot answer such fundamental questions about our ACC scheme. Mr. Speaker, let me go through the key changes that we are making in this bill. The first thing is to push out the full from 2014 to 2019. That provision will reduce the volatility in levies and take pressure off levy payers. Members on this side of the House simply ask the question, should we push the full funding date out to 2019? We say yes, they say no. Mr. Speaker, there is a change I made in the committee stages of this bill, and that is to call it what I think common sense New Zealanders would call it, the Accident Compensation Act. Now, in an exercise in political correctness that speaks volumes about the previous administration, that after 28 years of it being called the Accident Compensation Act, members opposite wanted to call it the Injury Prevention, Rehabilitation and Compensation Act. Because by somehow changing the name of the Act, they believe that somehow they would deal with the important issues of injury prevention and rehabilitation. The irony is that after changing the name of the Act, in each and every year, rehabilitation rates got worse and injury prevention actually did not work because injury rates continued to increase. I make no apologies for saying on this side of the House, forget the political correctness, call it what common sense New Zealanders should do, call it the Accident Compensation Act, although I wish to make plain to the House, just as I did when I launched the program of injury prevention in homes, that injury prevention is an important area of focus. Mr. Speaker, one of the areas in which the differences between this government and the opposition was so clear is in the area of criminal disentitlement. Members on this side of the House say that ACC is not for the purposes of providing compensation for those that go out and commit crime. I thought the debate that I had with Mr. Parker about Mr. Graham Burton, where Mr. Parker vigorously argued that he should, as a matter of basic human rights, receive support from ACC. Members on this side of the House have no sympathy for Graham Burton and make no apologies for the changes in this bill that disentitle criminals for ACC for when they are committing offences. Mr. Speaker, we also come to other provisions in this bill, and can I take that with respect to holiday pay? Members on this side of the House say people should not be able to simultaneously be better off by drawing both holiday pay and ACC income compensation at the same time. Do we live in such a generous nation? Are we so well off that people should be better off after having an accident than what they actually are working? Members on this side of the House say no. Members on that side of the House say yes. And equally so with the provisions in respect of seasonal work. On this side of the House we say actually it's wrong that Labor changed the law late 2008, particularly after declaring a loss of $2.4 billion, in which they said a seasonal worker will end up better off long-term on income compensation under their amendments than what they would be when they are working. What sort of signal do we actually send people when we say you're better off on ACC compo than what you are working? That is not a signal that members of the government want to send New Zealanders, and that's why we are making that change to the law. There has been the sensitive issue, Mr. Speaker, of self-inflicted injuries and suicide. I remind the House Owen Wood.